Experience, and
We got a good one
we
today,
have
Mr.
a
Balsamo.
very experienced guest today. I'd like to introduce to the group Joe. And Joe, if you don't mind telling the audience a little bit about you, a little bit about your background, and we'll take it from there.
Yeah, thanks for having me. Yeah, so I've been in the IT industry for over 30 years. I spent about 30 years at Prudential, and I had just about every IT job that you could possibly have in that 30 years time. I started off as an unpaid intern in 1995 and said, "Hey, this technology stuff's pretty cool. Let me hang in with it." My first job was in procurement, where I got bored and started installing the stuff I was buying for other people. And that's how I was able to get my hands-on aspect. I went from there. I learned networking, and I was a token ring specialist, if anybody remembers that term. Now I'm really dating myself. And I just continued on to where I got to a point where I was running all of platform engineering, so everything inside the data center. Spent a lot of years moving data centers around. Never want to do that again, but it's a big burden on a company to move data centers around. So things like cloud really have an impact I don't think people talk enough about, and giving opportunities for different companies to be able to enter a market and help businesses where they don't have to rely on one or two people who know how to do stuff. And that really interested me and spun off the first cloud team. We actually took a bunch of administrators. We applied the Agile framework on top of their role and turned them into cloud SREs. And that was the first engineering team that focused on cloud. Took a rapid shift at the end of my career, towards the end of my career, and took a position in charge of the workforce experience globally. So 50,000 contractors and employees. I was responsible for what it was like to work at Prudential, right, in their day. So it took end user to a whole nother level. It was about the experience, not just the technology itself. The thing is, I said yes to that job 3 days before COVID. Sorry, 3 months before COVID. Felt like 3 days. So we had to go through this massive transition of everybody in work to everybody outside of work. And then in that 3-year period, get everybody to come back in again, which was way harder than letting everybody go back out. So that's that. So I ended my career bringing people back into the office, and I learned a lot about that. And that's kind of where I started to see AI, because I was in charge of the help desk, and I saw the possibilities of how AI can really help us with the experience of the end user and the people that work inside a company, and how they can help themselves and empowering to help themselves, because no one wants to call a help desk. No one wants to get help. They want to do things themselves. So
Well,
yeah.
that's really cool, Joe. And one of the key things that I thought would be really cool for us to talk about today is, given the experience that you have with that cloud transformation, right? The whole multi-cloud and everything that goes with that, relocating data centers, operational efficiency. I'd be curious to hear your thoughts around where you see similarities and where you see differences with this very topical and timely transformation that's now happening in that AI space. Like, do you see parallels with where cloud was, say, 15 years ago to where AI is now, and things like that?
Yeah, I see quite a few parallels. First, I mean, it's really important to start off with, in an IT mindset, you start looking at what you could do different and better, but sometimes you fall short of what you can do different or better to help a business deliver, right? So I see lots of great ideas and lots of investments being made in technology over the years based on some sort of gold rush, right? And a lot of them don't pan out to actually help the business, right? So it's really important that IT organizations and businesses are aligned with what they're going to do with the technology, not just technology is this. However, right, as I pointed out earlier, the concept of moving data centers and even owning data centers, right, is just tedious and expensive, and it's not it's not a core competency of a company that sells financial products, right? So the cloud was the first significant difference I had seen in 10 or 15 years, right? And it was significant in that it made it less about technology and more about what technology can do, right? I think AI is taking that a whole nother level, right? And I think cloud and AI kind of go together, because if AI is done correctly, it's done on a modular architecture, and it can run anywhere for anyone, right? So I see that concept of the data center being available to anybody, getting past some of the speed of light challenges that people were never able to before, transitioning to now, okay, I'm very modular. Now, can I get my data to a point where my data can become a competitive advantage? And I think that's where AI comes in.
Interesting. Ethan, you look like you may have a follow-up question.
So my question, I was living through the cloud era through a company, worked a long time at Dell. Um, when you all first started your cloud journey, what kind of obstacles, bias? I mean, I know at the early days there was like a vector of trust. People had been doing IT a certain way for years before that. I knew there was a lot of change management, thought processes, security, that was just in the early days. People were trying to figure it out. What did you see on the front lines? How to
Yeah.
work?
So by far, security was the first, scary point. How can we give someone else our stuff and how can we trust them with that? But then you started to think, well, the amount of investment in security that, the AWS's, Google's, and Azures are making compared to what a company could make, there's no way your data center could be more secure than what they're delivering, right? So that didn't last too long, right? Then it quickly became an app rationalization issue. Like, what do I have? And can that run in the cloud? And if it can't run in the cloud efficiently, that can get real expensive really, really fast. So it was less about the cloud and more about how much money we're going to spend to make an app run in the cloud. And sometimes the economics weren't there. It was just simply cheaper to keep it. But that's more of a short-term thought process, because if you keep it for 2 more years because you're going to get rid of it, sure, don't move it to the cloud. But if you keep it for 10 or 15 and keep iterating, that's the number that people don't know, that people ignore, right? And that's where you have to start to figure out, well, where is it going to get cheaper for me? And that is just a churn, right? So what a lot of companies did and what we did is focus on, well, what are we doing that's new, right? And go there first, right? So anything new goes there first and follows a more modular pattern. And anything old has to be put on a path to get to be new, and the new would include being in the cloud. The last piece, and I think it's still a problem, is data gravity, right? So you have to move a lot of data around. You have to get it out of your data center into somewhere else. And you have to keep manipulating it and potentially separating it depending on regulatory rules in whatever country you work in. So that's also a problem. I think that problem still exists, but that's where you can start talking about AI and where AI might be able to help with certain pieces by moving only the data you need or helping you identify only the data you need and getting it to the right place at the right time.
So what would you say in your mind as you've led these transformations and going through the cloud one, and you've highlighted a couple of parallels with AI, what would in your mind be the top 3 considerations or factors that you would counsel, say, a CIO or a CTO who's looking at this, or maybe even just a business executive in general who's not in that technology org, but is looking at AI and what it could potentially do? How can they set up and optimize their strategy to really make the most of this extremely rapid transformation and iteration that we're seeing in this space, where things are getting updated like, major step functions every, say, 3 to 6 months?
Yeah, I think they have to break AI into 2 pieces. And I don't mean to, I'm terribly oversimplifying it here, but if you're in the business right now, you want to invest in things that will give you a competitive advantage, right? There's a lot of duplicate products out there. Differentiating yourself is something that you really have to focus your attention on. But you also get caught up in investing in products just to keep up, to be a company people want to work for, to be a company that people want to interact with, to give the best possible experience to your customer. And that doesn't sell you more product, but keeps the ones you already have. So you have to keep that in mind also. Those two kind of have to go together. So what do I have to spend in order to keep up and look like a modern company? And what do I have to spend to get myself a competitive advantage to get more customers or release new products faster, or understand simply what products should I be releasing, right? And then you have the other side, right? How do I get my workforce to be more productive, which could in turn become a competitive advantage, particularly for recruiting or just attracting the best talent in the industry, making it a place you want to work for. But it's very, very, very expensive. Right now it is very expensive, right? So people are spending, tens of millions of dollars. And in the end, while it's great to have your meeting summarized and and having having your videos broken into where speakers are attributed, those are all great aspects and does help people with things like training and moving along. Is it worth 30, 40, 50 million? It's a hard thought process, right? Finding technology that's going to give you a competitive advantage starts with understanding your data and the quality of that data, because AI is only as good as the quality of that data. And then finding a product that'll help you both with that outcome, that business outcome that you're looking for, that you feel will give you a competitive advantage, a product that will also look at your data, help you understand the quality of that data, and help you continually make it better and keep up with it, so you don't stray from accuracies. Because inaccurate data or inconsistent data is, going to cost money. It's going to cause your reputational issues, right? So you have to use AI very carefully, and AI can cause a lot of problems with bad data, right? I don't think there's a company in the world that is really comfortable with their data entitlements, right? Give everybody in the organization access via AI, and they might see stuff they didn't know they had access to and should have never seen in the first place. So now you've actually cost yourself more money as opposed to seeing a benefit. But if you focus on data quality and you focus on what you need to keep up a modern workplace and keep your eye on that ball, I think you'll make good decisions.
As you were talking, I was thinking about, I was always in the business in my career. We worked with the IT or the BU during these transformations. When you think about when we moved from kind of the old ways of doing things to this hybrid cloud-based way, that was a lot of technology that was hidden from us or the end user. Like, I didn't know. I just needed access to my drive. I needed it to work, and I wasn't going to call you as long as my data was up and running. Kind of more of like a back office. It was an architecture decision. When I think about AI, I guess where I'm going, AI not only is back office, it's also front office, and it's potentially changing the way we work. When Microsoft went from their, Microsoft on the desktop to cloud, it was the same way to work. Excel's Excel. It's Excel in the cloud, Excel on my desktop. I still know how to do Excel. Like, I'm a master at it. I didn't have to change how to use Excel. With AI, I see a lot of people struggling just to know, where do I deploy it? How do you change your work style to take advantage of it? As an IT professional executive, how do you see solving for the end user experience while trying to retool your systems? That's a hard one, I think. And I think a lot of companies are struggling with that.
Yeah, I think so. You made a really good point earlier, right? If you really should be looking at the technology as dial tone, right? So whatever I'm delivering to the business is going to be there, right? When they pick up that phone, they're going to hear dial tone. I know that's an old reference, but it stands pretty strong, right?
Yeah.
I don't have to worry about technology. The point about feeling like you have to worry about technology is more about what I would consider modern training. I think that everybody in business needs to understand technology and can't just rely on technology people, simply because we need their help to be able to correlate what they do in their businesses and how their business can grow to technology, right? So not understanding technology and its capabilities on the business side puts all the onus on an IT person who doesn't understand your business, and now you have a disconnect, right? So it's really, really important that modern businesses invest. I actually personally believe everybody should code, right? At least know one language, because if you can think like a developer, you don't have to write code, but if you can think like a developer, you'll know the power of software for your business and be able to ask the right questions or provide the right information for someone to help you. But that's a really good point. I think that in the end, you can't forget that the table stakes is that you have to run every day 24/7. And that part should be plumbing to the business. That part the business shouldn't understand.
So one of the things that you shared, Joe, in both this answer and the example you gave earlier that I thought was pretty interesting is it made me think of this concept of technical debt. And until I started the software company, I had heard of technical debt, but I didn't really understand it. And my CTO definitely educated me on the risks associated with technical debt. But for those who don't know, technical debt is basically decisions that you make now that are sacrificing, something that's either better built in the future or is more complex and intricate for delivering something sooner now. And we've done a really good job here at Iternal, really avoiding those long-term gotchas. We actually haven't had one in the last 5.5 years since we started building the product platform. And that's pretty amazing. Kudos to my engineering team for that. But there were definitely, it complicates the decision-making process in a lot of ways. Like, are we going to architect this for complete extensibility going forward? Or can we at least anticipate the next 3 to 5 years out how it might be used so that we structure our data in the right way, or we structure the overall way that that application can communicate with other applications. And so what the background, the reason I'm sharing this, because it got me thinking, there's almost like AI technical debt that's coming. But these terms and the other term that you called out, deploying AI, I think that based on what Ethan is saying around the fact that it's not only back office, it's also front office. Deploying AI means multiple things to different stakeholders. And I think that's really interesting, because now when you talk to an IT person, deploying AI means you have to have some kind of Kubernetes orchestration on a production-ready system that's containerized, that is able to do inferencing, and you have your API gateways so that your applications can talk to it. Like, that would be one form of deploying AI. But then there's also now this other form of deploying AI that is totally business focused. I think this is the first time, and you've got more experience in these past transformations than I do, so feel free to chime in on this, but it seems like it's the first time where deploying something like deploying cloud or something else isn't just solely an IT initiative of this application where the end user experience, Excel on the desktop, Excel on the cloud, is the same. It's like it's multiple things, and now there are multiple different types of AI technical debt that can also be incurred through data management, the decisions and stuff. So what do you think about that?
Yeah, I think it's a really good point, because cloud was more of a nuisance to most businesses. Like, what? I have to do this, or I have to do that, or I have to keep this in mind, or I have to change my code, or I have to move my data, right? IT spent a lot of time, I guess I would use a metaphor, like when I spend $20,000 replacing the roof on my house, but my house looks exactly the same, my wife gets upset that we spent $20,000, right? But if I bought all new furniture for the house for the same 20,000, she'd be very happy, because now the house is nicer, and she can use the kitchen or use the restroom better, right? And if you look at AI, that's more like getting the furniture, right? People realize what the power is. And then they immediately say, well, I understand that this can actually do things that I was never able to do before. I could summarize 10,000 pages of information and look for those needles in a haystack I need to make a decision very, very quickly, right? And for the first time, I actually understand how I can align a dynamic business, which changes constantly, to technology that is willing to change with me. Right. And I'm not making a commitment where I'm stuck with it for 3 to 5 years, which is what it was like. Right. Now, the cloud offers a lot of those elements, but it was in the form of, middleware or underlying infrastructure. Sure, I don't have to commit to the underlying infrastructure, right? Things like that. Where AI, it looks like, hey, I have a partner that's going to help me do better things with my data. And when I can do better things with my data, I can make better decisions. I can be more accurate, and I can be more personal, right? I can talk to my customer, no matter how many they are, in the same way, or different, depending on how my business works. So I think this is the first time in probably my entire career where I can have a conversation with a business person about technology that doesn't annoy them.
So along those lines, there's a concept of, get something out and get it done quick, which is, especially last year, what we saw all of the CEOs and the board saying. And in a lot of ways, that's justified, because going back to your point earlier around, there's AI to keep up and there's AI to create competitive differentiation. And I think everybody just jumped in immediately to, we can differentiate ourselves with AI. And that ultimately, because everybody was doing it or trying to do it, it ultimately led to just keeping up, where if you don't do it, then, that could be dangerous. But what are your thoughts about the decision-making process? Because you alluded to that data concept before around, making sure that the data sources that you're using are verified, accurate, able to be managed throughout the life cycle of that content. At least in what I'm seeing in these conversations with customers, it seems like that's still an afterthought. And it's more about just like, let's just jump to a result now. Like, I was on a call earlier today, and the guy said, I don't want to ever think about data taxonomy or management. I just want to be able to upload my documents, fire and forget. So can you talk a little bit, because I can totally understand the desire for just getting something as a quick win, but what are the long-term implications that you see of that? And, how are organizations going to have to change their thinking in terms of just get something out really quick to be able to show and get a quick AI win versus accumulating that technical debt going forward when they realize their, data may not be as good as they think?
Yeah, and that's not a simple question, and it probably will vary depending on what company you're working with. But there's a lot of companies that forget about not having organized data that don't even know what they have, right? So, and laying AI on top of that can end up being dangerous, as I mentioned earlier, right? You can have entitlement related issues, you could have privacy issues. There's lots of things that can go wrong if you just willy-nilly take the information and stick it on top of something, or integrate it into something, or integrate it into a data structure that doesn't allow you to make sure the right people can see the right thing, not just within your own company, but within the industry or within countries, right? Lots of things that can go wrong. And that could be a result of technical debt. It could be a result that you made decisions to separate the data, or put the data all in one place, or put the data in the cloud, or keep it internal, or invest in a product that is proprietary and you can't connect to it. So you have to get all the data out, right? These are all problems that companies are going to bump into, right? In my opinion, right now, those aren't the problems you want to tackle, right? I think that going after tech debt, you're in a much better position once you understand the art of the possible. So look for where you do understand that something's not working well. Look for where you do understand that you have the data. You may not understand the quality very well, but at least you know where it is and what you're looking for, right? And try to get those as quick wins for AI. And once you start getting comfortable with the capability of the technology, then you can start putting some effort into, systems that you want to modernize because you believe it's going to give you a competitive advantage, and figure out how to break those apart. If you try to take your mainframe and take all the data off of it and put it into a modern application and lay AI on top of it, it's going to end really badly, right? Maybe someday it won't, but right now it will. And if you take too long to deliver something, you're going to lose interest from the senior leadership. They're going to listen to people who are whispering in their ears that most of it's snake oil, and they can get it done in a few minutes. Just give me millions and millions of dollars, and it's not going to happen. And they're really not delivering anything more that I believe your average IT department can deliver if they work closely with the business and focus on what's attainable in the short term, while AI matures and gets better and better and better. So I wouldn't go after stores of data that they don't understand. I'd go after what you do understand and what you're struggling with, and try to get those wins as fast as possible. And I'm pretty sure that AI can do that for you now, and will only get better, because I think we haven't seen anything yet.
What do you think about the changes in workflow? Like the people who are responsible for managing that data or curating it or doing the life cycle management. What do you see as being a big consideration as to how people are modifying those work streams and responsibilities?
Yeah, I mean, that's an age-old question that predates predates AI or anything cloud. That some people get comfortable with workflows and just re-engineer their product with the same workflow, except it moves really, really fast. So you could take a bad process that was bad and make it fast, and then layer AI on top of it, make it even faster. But in the end, your outcome is still going to be, not going to be the outcome you're looking for, right? So re-engineering, or looking at your business process and re-engineering those business processes, are something you have to do, in my opinion. And it's very difficult for the people who work in those processes every day to be part of that discussion, because sometimes they don't see the possible, right? I like to ask a lot of folks, if this was perfect, what would it look like, right? And that's about the easiest way to get them to tell you what the process should look like, right? But if you ask them to re-engineer it, it always veers its way back to the original version, just in a cooler, prettier way, right? But you shouldn't stop everything and do nothing and put all your attention on process re-engineering, because that can go on forever, right? What you should do is take advantage of something like AI to help you expose what's wrong with your workflows, help you expose what is not running well. And that's where the testing and the learning comes in, right? And then iterate, make a change, make the workflow tighter, and add to your backlog that there's a set of things that you can need to make better, right? So don't wait to put AI in until your processes are perfect, because they're probably not going to be anyway, right? Use AI to help you get there, right? And expose some of the challenges that you're seeing in your workflow that's causing you time and money.
Yeah, it's interesting. I'm listening to the discussion, um, thinking back to previous technologies, like the last big craze that I was exposed to was the Internet of Things. Taking physical assets, making them digital assets,
Smart
empower.
refrigerators.
And yeah, I mean, and by the way, there was a lot of money spent on that, and still is in some cases. Um, but what I saw from the front lines and on the kind of in the sales and marketing aspect of the world, a lot of companies were in this like cycle of just buying stuff to do proof of concepts. We benefited from it. I mean, don't get me wrong, hey, POC, but you also want your customer to have success outcomes. You don't want them to be stuck in like just buying, infrastructure or technology to test and learn. I mean, eventually you have to make a decision to move forward. Like, and I was going to ask you, working for the size of the company you did, how do you balance as an executive? All right, staff, go test and learn, go experiment because we don't want to break things, but we got to get this thing into production. We got to move forward. We can't just be experimenting. I know because technical people love to experiment, engineers love to experiment, but eventually you have to move the business forward. How do you balance that?
Yeah, so not easy. I always repeat probably at least once per quarter that execution's 10x for every idea, right? Because a lot of people love the ideation process.
Yep.
I actually think COVID hurt that process, but in some ways helped it because you didn't have all the time to collaborate. And sometimes collaboration is good, and sometimes collaboration will lead you to weeks of nothingness, right? So, if you have an idea, get it to the right people who will be able to give you advice and either kill it or move forward with it. As far as finding time, that is unbelievably difficult in a large company. I'm not going to lie about that, right? Agile frameworks help out a lot because you can lay out all of your sprints and designate certain times of the month where all you're doing is focusing on test and learning, right? What's really, really important is that you give everybody an opportunity to show the results of your test, and that test is no longer than 2 weeks, right? Matter of fact, it's actually no longer than 2 or 3 days, to be honest with you. Sometimes we'll have longer test cycles, but the Agile framework will allow you to give them dedicated time to focus on that. And that dedicated time helps them with conflict resolution. So if their friend calls up and says they need help, the friend should already know in advance that these 2 days are really focused on test and learn, right? Coming out of that test and learn, I would say that maybe 1 out of every 50, maybe even 100 is a really good idea, right? But we didn't waste a lot of time on the other 99. 4 good ideas per year are life-changing for an organization. 4, just 4, right? So putting time aside in a framework that allows the employee to step back, but holding employee accountable for showing their work and getting feedback, and allowing your organization to have a say in whether we move forward or not leave it up to me or somebody else just to say yes or no to everything, is the best way to do that. And I think that because AI itself, to take it back to AI, sorry if it's repetitive, but AI could actually help with the testing process, right? There are technologies that you could use to help accelerate some of that ideation and get to the point where, hey, this is a good idea or this is a bad idea. I've seen the technology for it, and it's quite possible. It's all about information, right? If you can get the information quick, you can make quicker decisions. You can get more things done. You get more ideas. More ideas usually equal a better company.
So along those lines, one of the things that I've seen a lot is AI for ideation. And I think that what you just described is a really smart take on it, and one that probably isn't thought about. Like when I first heard, oh, let's use AI for ideation of things, I thought it meant somebody going to one of these AI solutions like ChatGPT and say, give me 10 business ideas. You press a button and you go. And like, I was like, okay, I'm going to totally write that off as a concept because, that's not how you're going to get the best ideas. But what you described is I think a lot more of a benefit from an ideation and iteration standpoint, where it's not so much about coming up with the initial thing, and you could use it for that, but it's more about like that life cycle of development to do multiple different stages of testing and evaluation and verification that actually what you're thinking is good. One example that I just saw a paper on in the AI space recently is apparently we're at the point now where these large language models are good enough that with some prompt engineering, you can actually give somebody, we're already talking about AIs like they're humans, the ability to act in a role-playing scenario for psychological and sociological test and research, where you can actually have somebody say, hey, play a Italian 50-year-old man that lives in New York. And it will actually mirror the traits of that person versus a Hispanic woman in LA or whatever it is, it's 20 years old. And it will do that kind of capability. And apparently the ability for the AI to embody those traits and answer like survey or demographic related questions or voter preferences or any other sociological, cultural exploration that somebody may want to do. It was like 90-something+% accurate with what real test cases are. And I think that's crazy. So I just want to share that and also tie it back to what you're saying about like this ideation process. It's more than just coming up with the initial thing. But what do you think about that?
Yeah, I mean, that's pretty amazing. And I think the concept is really more about ideation built upon an outcome that we agree is a challenge or something we want to see versus playing, right? So you use the concept of, I think it's great that people, especially outside of work, play to learn things, right? And I think AI is going to play a strong role in helping them. And I think the example you gave, I wasn't even aware of the detail there. That sounds pretty incredible. But if you're able to layer those types of concepts to, I have this outcome and everything starts with an outcome. You can't go test something that doesn't deliver an outcome. So what's the outcome? And I'll give you an example. We had 3,000 possible ways you could log a help desk ticket. 3,000 possible ways, right? So, and if you start to think about it, you understand why you got there, because there are lots of different problems people can have, right? Everything from I just have a question to where to find something to, my laptop's broke, right? How in the world, where would you get started to get that down to something that's actually reasonable, right? So to be able to take that data set and play with it and figure out whether there's some insights based on how many times they're being used or based on where they're coming from and how often that's there, right? These are the types of testing that would come back and say, hey, I think we could lower the CIs. Not necessarily we won't know how to do it, but we would at least see the opportunity to tell us that you can do something with this, right? And I think that's where AI is going to make a big difference, because you're not sitting in a spreadsheet sorting rows and correlating things yourself anymore, right? Mm-hmm. Or you're not putting it in a database and doing your best to write a query that answers a question that's pretty basic or creates a graph that kind of gives you some insight but doesn't really make it actionable. I think that AI is going to help you mine that data quickly and realize whether you have a good idea or not, or this is a waste of time, we should blow up and start over, right? But keep in mind, though, it all starts with that outcome. And if you don't have an outcome, you're just playing and playing is learning, but it's not learning for business, it's learning for personal.
Okay. So
yeah, one thing I saw recently as you were talking and as AI can not only be used for ideation, and you said something about using AI to help you test and validate internal processes as an agent to test and validate assumptions or things internally. I was watching a podcast this a couple months ago about a company in the AI space, and it's something I was interested in because I spent a fortune in my career doing market research, sentiment analysis, like getting ready to launch a new product or offering, whether it's an IT offering internally or externally to the marketplace. You want to do research. You want to validate that the market wants what you're about to go spend a lot of money to build. This company is using AI to do synthetic sentiment analysis, because we put all our information on the web. Everyone seems to have the public persona, but they're going off and doing surveys where they said, a CIO would think of this, a CTO or CEO, different persona types, business owners. And what they're doing is they're benchmarking their synthetic AI data against actual survey data. And to what John was saying, they're getting like 96 to 98% accuracy. And one cost, hundreds of dollars when one cost and the other side's potentially millions of dollars to do it for real. Not to mention to get people's time. I just think that's fascinating, and it's also scary because when you start to do fake things, even though you're benchmarking against what human response, you start to worry about, okay, we keep doing it this way for long. Do you start having an echo chamber, hearing what you want to hear versus true human response? But I think it's fascinating that we have the ability to do that. What do you think as a business user? What are some of the best use cases for AI, internal to the business, or getting feedback on things you're going to do with the business?
Oh, it's an interesting question. I don't know, John, you have any thoughts?
Yeah, I've got a couple, but there's something that Ethan said that I thought was really interesting as it relates to that echo chamber concern. One of the things that I wonder, because I think about the same thing, is the AI going to be able to recognize true innovation? Like right now, there's all this talk about, how sentient is the AI, and I mean, like that's a whole other conversation. But I think we're getting to the point where like there are some things going on in that space that make me wonder, okay, how far away are we from this thing actually being alive in the sense of being able to mirror what a human thinks and has feelings and all that stuff, and like, is that AI going to remember that you were not nice to it when you asked it that question to help you debug your code? And like, is it going to get you?
The answer is yes, John. Be nice to your AI.
Yeah, absolutely.
It remembers. It
I
now
say
remembers.
please and thank you. And I think I get better results from it when I say that worked, thank you. Like I would treat one of my developers on a Slack channel. But anyway, my point is that, depending on the level of sentience, whether you believe there's no sentience right now or there is some resemblance, or maybe we're a lot farther along than that, the AI is collectively understanding everything that humans have generated from the last 50 years of digital text input, and probably more like really the last 25 years of structured text input in the form of websites and things like that, and books, of course, extend far beyond that and behind that historically. But is it enough to appreciate a truly great new idea? And maybe the answer is yes. I think we're getting close, but ultimately, like, so just an example off the top of my head would be, something like what Elon is doing up in space with Starlink, or landing rockets vertically and reusing them. Like, is there enough of an appreciation for that as a new paradigm of thinking? Like if that AI, let's say AI existed in its current state today, where we've got these leading models like Claude 3.5 and Llama 3.1 and GPT 4.0. And if you were to put that in, say, 2000s, like the year 2000, and you gave it to NASA, and then NASA asked the question, should we invest in a program that evaluates the feasibility of vertical rocket launch and recovery? Would it actually be able to use everything up until that year 2000 knowledge base as a ground truth to say, yeah, it's actually possible and we should actually invest in it? Or would it completely miss the boat on something like that, like NASA has? And it took a true innovator and visionary to say, hey, I'm going to actually try that because I think it's possible. So that's what I think, Joe. What do you think about that?
It's interesting. I mean, using the past to predict the future, right? And then you transition to using the past to get creative about the future. And then you get to, I believe the creativity to be the truth, right? There's a lot of jumps there, right? So I think that it becomes sentient when it's creative, right? But understanding that creativity is coming purely from its experience of the past, right? It's not actively looking around. It's not actively seeing what's happening around you, right? it's not making decisions that came from your life experience unless you've given it your life experience, right? So there's lots of things that I think stop it from being the only source of truth, right? I think that it'd be great if it was creative. It would be great to give us ideas, but ultimately it's not going to be able to give you an execution plan that I would trust yet. Yet, right? You still need humans to come up with the execution plan. And I think that, again, we go back to what we were talking about earlier, that the businesses need to understand AI better and technologists need to understand businesses better, right? And if you put those three together, even though the IT folks and the business folks are both people, from a role perspective, if you take AI, the business, and the IT group, and you mix them together, I think you do get an execution plan. I think you do get much better ideas. And I do think you get through the ideation process to execution incredibly fast. If you're focusing on things that will give you an advantage in the industry or things that will make working at your workplace a better place. If you go into it with a thought process of things that are a waste of time or are just fun, you can go down a pretty hefty rabbit hole. And if you only believe the AI and don't believe the folks, you can also go down a rabbit hole. Again, this is just an opinion, but it can get scary if ideas become truths. And I think that's happening a little too often in our world, right? And it shouldn't be part of business. Business requires some critical thinking, and I think people know that. I think that's where it goes, no matter how sentient the AI gets. Right?
So one of the other thoughts that I had that I wanted to get your thoughts on, given your background and expertise in product and large scale organizational transformation, and you kind of alluded to this in a way earlier, is there's a lot of existing technology that an enterprise uses. There are companies out there that sell software solutions. We are one of those. How does, in your mind, this whole paradigm shift of AI come into play as it relates to incorporating AI into existing software offerings that may have been developed either internally at that company or are purchased and consumed by that company? And how does retrofitting fall into play versus something like, re-engineering of that holistically? And I'll give you a good example. So we earlier this year launched Waypoint, which is our generative AI first RFP platform. And our real differentiator is that we built the entire platform from the ground up with the concept of generative AI in mind. And we incorporated our Blockify data management system, which improves the accuracy of a large language model by 40 times, into that Waypoint RFP responder, with the intention being that the biggest issue that we see in the enterprise space today is hallucinations. And the Blockify system, to optimize that data, virtually eliminates all hallucinations. So we built Waypoint to use that elimination of hallucination capability to deliver better RFPs. And then ultimately the entire workflow around how you respond to an RFP was built around this concept of, I want to tell and be very narrowly defined within each customer question what I want to give back as an answer. I can have a human involved in that process so that you can curate the right information, but then you build out this structure in a couple minutes, and then you click the button and it sends it all off to an AI to formalize it, and then you can allow the human to review very easily. What did the AI say? What was the ground source of truth, and things like that. So we re-engineered it. We threw out any kind of concept of what an old RFP tool would look like, and instead of retrofitting it into something old, we built from scratch. So what do you think is that something that has to be done? Is it a smart thing to do? Is it a case-by-case basis depending on how the application is used? Like, given your background in understanding 30 years of technical debt and applications that an enterprise of 50,000+ people would use, what do you think about how they fit AI into those products?
Yeah, so first, you gave a really good example with Waypoint that kind of ties to the theme of, well, the theme that this discussion has gone down, is that with Waypoint, you gave an example of a product that pays attention to your data and helps you make your data better through deduplication and accuracy, right? Which is key to this business outcome success. So you're making the IT people happy, right? but you're also speaking the language of the business by saying you can now do RFPs much faster. You can now share ideas much faster. You can now pivot. And when you do that, you can do it with confidence because your data is going to be accurate, right? And you don't need 15 proofreaders before you send it out, right? So that's a really good example of what I would say is a new way of looking at your data. It's not necessarily a new application. It's just a new way of looking at your data. And there's lots of opportunity to simply just look at your data a different way rather than buying applications, right? Because when you bought an application, you took all your data, you put it in there, and you might or might not be able to code to it to make it modern. Or you completely leave the innovation curve up to the company that sold it to you, and you're in their hands of how fast you can move, right? In this particular case, the product is really just an engine for you to take what you already have and do things better with it, right? And I think that's how we should look at new. I don't think AI is going to go into your case management system and completely modernize the case management system overnight, especially when your case management system is probably multiple case management systems that came from 5 acquisitions from 3 different companies, right? So that's, if you're looking at it that way, you're going to get really mired into it. But there might be data in your case management system that you can use AI to access and come up with new insights on how to sell to a customer. So don't look at it as rebuilding an application, but building something on the periphery that could help leverage or use your data in a different way, and maybe give advice on how you can modernize that application piece by piece and make it modular. Because truly, I think all those massive systems that it's going to take years to modernize, it's not going to go from one system to a modern system. It's going to go from an existing system to millions of different pieces talking to a data store, right? So if you can start now and use AI to understand your data, you're going to have a leg up as you begin to chip away at that. And the chipping away part is a lot more than AI, right? It's a lot more than AI. But yeah, being able to do things that you do today faster and to enable your business to either sell more, to treat your customer better and keep the customers that you already have, and to learn more about your customer and how else you can help them. That's where I put all my time, right? And I think that's where AI shines, right? Along with, workforce productivity and, helping your employees be more accurate and working on the same wavelength as the rest of the organization.
These big changes in technology. Sorry, I had to go check on my AI-enabled car real time. This is a real live podcast for people knowing. But when I think about, like, when you mentioned at the very beginning of this podcast, you talked about cloud, and you were talking about getting your organization to move from a on-prem to a cloud-based way. And you said all new applications got to be cloud first, whether that's the first way you think about it, cloud first, or at least try that. And if you can't, leave it on-prem. But you had to put that mandate in place so they make forward progress. Otherwise, you just stay where you were. I kind of think you can use AI as a litmus test for that and say, look, new applications, new business services, got to be AI first. And you try it, and but you have to, like you said, you have to have a very good risk analysis on, should we leave it alone or should we really push it forward? But that's a leadership. That's a tops down type of decision you have to make. But I think a lot of companies were taking that approach. We can see from the expenditures, there's obviously a lot of investment going into AI, but as a practitioner, it's one thing just to spend money on things. It's a lot different to make decision on when to say yes versus when to say not. This is not a good use for AI. Do you have any words of wisdom for others out there, like things you've done in non-AI implementations that you would use as a scorecard? Like, how do you know when it makes sense to go?
It'll differ by business. In my opinion, the easiest entry point is unstructured data, right? That's by far the easiest entry point, right? And unstructured data comes in lots of different forms. I think back when we were doing a lot of M&A work, right? And some of these, these are billion-dollar deals where accuracy and TSAs have to be perfectly tracked and numbers have to be, looked at. And I'd be working on like version 17 of an Excel spreadsheet, not knowing whether that was the latest version. Right. And it would be in some share, and then, or it would be in, it would be on somebody's, OneDrive that was being shared. And there was no central source of it. Sure, there was a deal room for the business documents, but aside from the business documents, there's thousands of documents that go into creating RFP response or a TSA, right? And some of those documents are records, right? So you, on top of just being able to find everything and make sure it's accurate in the latest one, and when you go back and look at it, make sure that you're benchmarking against the right document, right? You could have records issues. You could have privacy concerns. Like I might not be able to see that file and I can, right? So unstructured data opens can of worms for all kinds of problems for an organization, regulatory problems, accuracy problems, reputational problems, right? If I had something where it wasn't about files, it was about the data and the information and what the latest information is, and we use the term ideas a lot here, but all that data is all of your ideas. And if you can get your ideas straight in your head and get your ideas straight in technology, you're in good shape. And I think that getting your ideas in technology, straight in technology, is here, and AI is going to let you do that. And if you think in those ideas and put those ideas together, you can share those ideas. You can make sure they're up to date. You're not thinking about a bunch of unstructured data and hope that the stuff in the share is good, right? There's also a lot of other implications, right? You're going to move from keyword search to semantic search, right? You're going to be able to put things in front of it and allow other people to ask it questions with confidence because you know your data is going to give the right answer. Right. So there's lots of things that you could do with unstructured data that is a gold mine of information for your organization. And I would start there.
You know, as you talk about that, you know, AI really is a great enabler of information. It could, if used right, get your data house in order. It's a reason to clean things up. We've all been the victims of cheap data storage.
Yep.
Yeah, I mean, like we're just storing things and like, should we store them?
I was a key salesman when I ran storage.
It's true though, but I mean, remember that as the cost of storage in the old days was so expensive, you had to be real careful. Like, do you want to? We're just going to delete it, you know, get rid of it. But now you can keep everything. But should you? And so I think that a lot of organizations, with the advent of AI, have another chance to get their data houses in order to take full advantage of this intelligent system. And I think it's going to be, you know, we always know you're only as good as your data, or, you know, data's the new oil. Well, AI, you don't want AI messing with, you know, hallucinations or
Right.
version 17 of your spreadsheet when it should be version 20.
Right.
So
And prioritize your data and tag your data. There's lots of different things you can do once you understand it. But right now you understand files. And files are that thing you pointed out earlier. Businesses don't want to know anything about files. They want to know what's inside. Right? They want to know what that file can do for them, right? And there's lots of, I would argue there's more information sitting inside files that are valuable to organizations than in structured databases, right? That it's quite possible that could be the answer. And I think that AI is going to help us figure that out, where before the task was way too daunting, way too expensive.
Mm-hmm. Well, that's why I love the tagline that we came up with, you know, while the world thinks in files, we think in ideas.
Absolutely.
Right? And to your point, everything that we do, at least probably 90% of what's valuable, is 100% in those files, right? It's in, you know, Word document, white papers, or strategy plans, or meeting minutes, or PowerPoint slides, you know, all of that. And yeah, there's some stuff in like a CRM and some of these other, but in terms of the value of the intellectual property of the teams, whether it's design briefs or even code, right? That stuff exists in that unstructured format, which is, you know, being able to process that is the next level of value. And, you know, to your point, the aggregation of that and making it all of those ideas available in a way that can account for the compliance, the access controls, the permissioning, the maintenance, content lifecycle of those ideas. Oh, we're not thinking in this way anymore because that's the old business strategy, and we're now in the new business strategy, right? And instead of having to update that business strategy across 20 or 100 different strategic plan documents that go to different teams or stakeholders, you update that one idea in that one location that all of the other AIs that are, you know, the design team AI or the product team AI uses, and references that data when it's creating its responses, right? That's, I think, truly the future is really cool stuff.
And it will eliminate a very hidden problem called SME churn, right? So you have these, you have a small group of people who have all this information, and everybody keeps going to them, going to them, going to them for information, right? And they talk about how frustrating it is to spend all this time giving people updates about information, right? But truth be told, they love being the person. They love being the person that gets called, right? But as a business, you don't like that, right? So being able to say, you're responsible for these ideas, this information, just keep it up to date, and I don't have to bug you because I can go in there and look at it every time. So to distribute the work and keep up with it, that should kill a lot of that SME churn, because when those folks are not working, you're not working, right? And that's how businesses.
That's hilarious. I'm waiting, Joe, for the first, and they're probably out there listening, the engineer working on their virtual self, because they know they're valuable, but they're like, I need time to work. And they keep asking me the same question. There's an engineer working on an agent that they're just going to put in front of going, ask this virtual person first, and then come to me. But more than likely, you're going to get the answer when you should have Googled it.
That's what we're doing with our, partner enablement stuff. Same thing, right? If we can scale to thousands of partner sellers through an AI assistant, that's going to be huge, which is really cool. But there's a real world example that we see talking about the subject matter expert challenges of scaling in that institutional knowledge. That's pretty interesting, especially in government programs, as well as the engineering industry or aerospace. There are people who are well beyond the years of retirement that they enjoy working still, but these programs have gone on for like 30 years, and those people have been on the program the entire time, and they're the only ones that have the institutional knowledge of how these different parts of this highly complex program actually fit together to connect all of the disparate pieces. Because if those people weren't there, then nobody would know how to solve that issue. And so as a result, these companies are having to retain these people and pay them enormous salaries, which is awesome for them, right? They certainly earned it. But if God forbid something happens to one of those people, they get hit by a bus or something, you've lost the one person that knew how everything worked, and you're dead in the water for like 6 months or a year to bring somebody else up to speed. And so one of the exciting things that I see from an AI standpoint, and one of the things that we've built out through our auto reports technology, is you can take all of the training content, imagine you're working on some kind of like a jet engine, and there's some 30-year veteran that was the guy who created the initial concept, and he's got interns that are coming in, and he's standing next to the engine with them with the hatch open, and he's like pointing at some of the cooling tubes, and he's saying, we routed them in this certain way because the temperature had to stay below 153 degrees Celsius to be able to optimize the viscosity of the liquid, whatever it is. And if that kind of information is recorded, we can transcribe it using AI, and then we can take that transcription and turn it into ideas, right? That's the Blockify process, where we extract all of the key ideas from one of these long form documents, and we can turn that into, the engine or the coolant needs to be kept at this temperature, because otherwise, something is going to happen in this system, number 7, whatever it is, right? And then that becomes something that can be incorporated into that AI. So going forward, if any of those interns or junior engineers have a question about the decision that was made, or that person is truly ready to retire at, say, 90 years old off on a beach somewhere, they still have the ability to benefit from all of that information versus somebody forgetting it and moving on. So
you can completely transform the onboarding process by personalizing the training programs with the data you already have, right? Because right now the training programs are really more about corporate compliance and have nothing to do with the job you're actually going to do, right? It's usually another person that throws you into the fire and teaches you that. Now you still have to do that. You still have to get through real world challenges in order to really understand something. But to be able to come in at least warm, and I think you made a really important point, to have something that's not necessarily a person to go to and say, I don't remember this. Could you please help me figure out this particular thing, or what this word means, or why they would say something like this? That's huge. I mean, if I had that as part of my onboarding process, my employees the time to value for every employee I brought in would probably quadruple, at least quadruple.
Yeah. So we're getting close on time here. So I'm going to end with a theoretical comment / question that I've been thinking about, which is pretty interesting. So I was reading an article maybe a month or two ago, and it was talking about children and parenting and brain development. So the question, the thought that I would pose to you is, are we as humans simply large language models? And the reason why I say that is because a large language model is a neural network, right? Your brain, where you take all this information and you feed it through, and that helps teach it how to understand patterns and trains of thought. And all of this large language model inferencing is based on the information that was provided as an input, say me asking you this question. There are a series of decisions that are being made in your head that establish a pattern for a response to that external stimulus. And so the concept is, when your parents talk to you and the people around you talk to you as a child, and they ask you a question, you give them an answer, right? You ask them, what was it like when you were my age, or whatever it may be, or why is the moon white, or whatever the question is, there is an answer that is provided as that training source of information. And as that person grows up, they get more and more exposure to different viewpoints. Some are contradicting in nature, which cause confusion, but ultimately you get out the other side a adult who can most of the time form decent sentences or responses to given things. So that is my philosophical thought.
John, I'm going to just jump on this one as a parent of 3 children, and in their very formative years. We are large language models, and be very careful what you as an individual or your children consume. Even more of a reason to monitor social media, because it can train them to be not in the best way. So for all the parents listening to stuff, it's true. You always be careful what you read, be careful who you hang around with, and be careful who's training your kids, because they're getting trained just like our AI. Bad data, wrong data, or fake data.
Yeah, a lot of people you're bumping into are hallucinating.
Yeah. Sometimes my kid is like, I was talking to my son going, is that fact or is that hallucination? I'm like, let's just check your LLM here.
Yeah,
Oh,
right.
yeah,
Outcome is not necessarily the truth. It's just an idea.
yeah. Well, I think about it because my dad started talking to me like I was an adult, like when I was like 3 months old. There are old videotapes of him, and he'd take me on like runs, and I'd be in one of those stroller, we called it a chariot. He'd push me, and we'd stop at a stop sign. He says, "John Byron, what does that say?" And he said, "STOP spells stop. What does GO spell?" And as a 1-year-old, I started talking, very early. I said, "GO spells go." Right. And so, it's all that, to your point, the reinforcement of it. And I love the concept of calling people who are thinking crazy things hallucinations.
You need to retrain your model.
Yeah. No, that's cool. Well, Joe, hey, thank you so much for taking the time. It's been a blast working with you, and so happy to have you on the podcast. I think that our viewers are going to get a lot of benefit out of what you shared. So